Okay, guys, today in class we started looking at the new classical ASAD model. We talked about what all of these curves mean, and we did the basic model in equilibrium. So right now we can see our AD, our SRAS, our LRAS are all intersecting in the same point, which means we're at long run equilibrium. We're at our full employment level of output, or our full potential output, which means if we're at our natural level of unemployment, this is the full productive potential of this economy. We're at YF. We have price stability over here on the y-axis, indicating an equilibrium price. So what I want to talk about today is what happens when there's a disequilibrium. What happens when one of these curves shifts? And we're going to start by looking at the AD curve. If you remember in class, we talked about the components of AD, are the consumer spending plus business investment or capital investment plus government spending plus net exports. So if something were to change one of these components of AD, it would potentially shift the entire AD curve. So we're going to start by talking about a negative AD shock. Now remember, negative doesn't refer to good or bad. Negative means left or right. So let's say that there's a stock market crash, which would definitely be a negative. Stock market crashes. We know a lot of consumer wealth just simply disappears into thin air. It's going to really, really lower consumer spending. People's money has disappeared. It's going to really harm consumer confidence. People are going to be scared to borrow. They're going to be scared to tap into their savings. So there's going to be much, much less spending. So we know the impact of that will be that the aggregate demand curve will shift to the right, or left, which will indicate with an AD1. And what happens is at AD1 we have a new short-run equilibrium where AD hits SRAS, and our new level of output we can indicate with Y1. That means that our level of productivity is falling, which makes sense. If people are spending less money, there's going to be a need to produce less output. We also know that output and unemployment are inversely related. So as that level of output falls, the level of unemployment will rise. On the y-axis, we can see that this new short-run equilibrium is going to cause some level of deflation as the average price level will begin to fall. So if you put all that together, we have a stock market crash causing a negative AD shock, less consumer spending, less household spending, causing a fall in productivity, which in turn causes a rise in unemployment and a fall in price levels. That's a textbook recession. And if you indicate the difference here between actual output at Y1 and potential output at YF, that's where we would indicate what we call the recessionary gap that I just shaded in there in green. All right, so recessions are always caused by negative demand shocks, whether we're talking about the Great Depression with the stock market crash, whether you're talking about the Great Recession in 2008 with the housing market crash. Recessions always happen when there is less money being spent. Now, what happens if we have the opposite and we have a positive demand shock? So a positive AD shock would be caused by people spending more money. This could be interest rates fall, so people are going out and borrowing a lot of money. This could be an increase in the value of stock market or housing market or bond market, anything that would cause people to become more confident and want to spend more money. If that happens, our AD curve is going to shift to the right, which will indicate with AD1. And at the rightward shift of the AD, we can see that our new short-run equilibrium level of output is at Y1. It's actually greater than our potential output. And you would say, well, wait a second, hold on. How is that possible? How is it greater? How is it capable? How can an economy be capable of producing greater than its potential? And the answer lies in the fact that the potential is set at the full employment level of output. And remember, full employment is the natural level of unemployment, which literally means 3 to 4%. So if we're producing above our full employment level, it must mean that we have an unemployment level below full employment. We might be operating here at 1 or 2% unemployment, which sounds fantastic, right? But it has consequences. We have people working in fields that they may be unqualified for. It's also going to put a lot of upward pressure on wages. If there are people who are working in jobs they're unqualified for, those that are qualified are going to demand wage increases. Also, with the low levels of unemployed workers seeking work, those workers are going to be able to demand higher wages. So with those increases in wages, we know that it's going to put upward pressure on prices, and we're going to see inflation. In fact, this is what we call this situation. When there is a positive AD shock that shifts the AD curve to the right of full employment, we call that inflation. And the shaded in area is our inflationary gap. Now you would say, wait, that's kind of bizarre. Shouldn't the inflationary gap be up here? Well, it would make sense to show it, the difference in equilibrium price and actual price level, but we actually indicate inflation by showing that actual output is greater than potential output. So you can see here that recessions and inflations are caused by demand shocks. When demand falls and spending goes down, it has the potential to shift the AD to the left and throw us into a recession. When demand is high and people are spending a lot of money, it's going to shift the AD curve to the right and create inflation. Now, how about the short-run aggregate supply curve? Can that curve move? And we know the answer to that is yes. So let's start with a negative SRAS shock. And remember, any kind of SRAS shock has got to be something that is going to change the cost structure for firms at a macro level. So we're not talking about a change in the price of pepperoni or a raise in the minimum wage for wait staff at restaurants. What we're talking about is something that's going to impact a great deal of firms. So we might be talking about a change in oil prices or a change in steel prices or a rise in the overall nominal wage or minimum wage nationwide. So let's start by saying maybe there's some kind of cut in oil production in the Middle East. And what happens is oil prices spike dramatically. That's going to cause a negative SRAS shock, as all firms we know are somehow impacted by oil costs, whether it's in energy, whether it's in transportation costs. And that would cause a negative short-run supply shock. Our SRAS curve goes to the left to SRAS 1. And we can see our new short-run equilibrium has created a multitude of problems. Our new level of output is at Y1. Okay, and that makes sense. With higher oil prices, firms are going to have to pay more money for the energy, which means less productivity. And in fact, what it'll mean is higher unemployment, as what they might have to do is lay off some workers to pay for an increased energy. Those laid off workers will no longer be productive, and you have a fall in GDP coupled with a rise in unemployment. But then over here on the y-axis, we also have inflation. And again, we know that if oil prices go up, it's going to raise the price of pretty much everything. So what we have here is rising inflation coupled with rising unemployment and falling productivity. That's about as bad as it gets. And the name that we put on this, it's called stagflation. It was coined during the Jimmy Carter presidency to refer to what was happening with the economy during the Arab oil embargo and then the rising inflation and unemployment that went along with that. So stagflations are caused by negative supply shocks. And we'll finish up here by looking at the positive supply shock. So positive SRAS would be anything that lowered the cost structure for firms at a macro level. So it would pretty much be the opposite of what we were looking at. It could be falling corporate income taxes. It could be falling energy costs. It could be falling nominal wages. Anything that would shift our short-run supply curve to the right, to SRAS1. And we know that, if you just think about the idea of falling energy prices, that would have a dramatically positive effect, and a number of different reasons. Number one, if firms are spending less money on energy, it means they can hire more employees. Our productivity is going to increase. Our unemployment will fall, which is indicated at Y1. Once again, we have actual output greater than full employment output. But also, if they're spending less money on this output, we can see falling price levels too. So what we modeled here is called an expansion. So where recessions and inflations are caused by demand shocks, stagflations and expansions are going to be caused by supply shocks, short-run supply shocks. Now, can that long-run supply curve move? And the answer is, of course, every curve can move. The long-run supply curve, we know, is basically indicating the amount of output that can be produced in a nation when we're at the full employment level or the natural level of unemployment. So essentially, if we have 3% unemployment, how much can be produced? So the only thing that's going to change that LRAS curve is the ability to produce more or less with still being at full employment. So we have to change what I call Q and Q, the quality and or quantity of factors of production. So if we simply have more labor, maybe the labor force participation rate increases, perhaps there's higher birth rates or more immigration. Or if we have more natural resources, maybe we find new sources of energy, maybe technology improves, maybe we have programs sending more and more people to college and job training that's improving our human capital. But if something allows us to become more productive with essentially the same natural level of unemployment, then the LRAS curve is going to shift to the right and create more potential productivity. And that, of course, would be a positive. And anything that shrunk the level of the quality and quantity would then go ahead and shift the LRAS curve to the left. But we generally don't see that. Usually, productive potential will only increase. So you can see there's a lot of parallels here between our LRAS curve, and if you can think back to Unit 1, our production possibilities curve that we know is perpetually shifting outward as our factors of production grow. Now, last thing here I want to take a look at is you're not always going to be drawing this model in equilibrium and going from there. Sometimes you're going to see questions on exams where it's going to ask you to start the model in a recession or start the model in an inflation. And that's usually the only places they'll ask you to start. So if it says draw this model in long-run equilibrium, then, well, okay, let's get rid of that. Bam, you're doing that. That's long-run equilibrium. But what if it says to draw a short-run equilibrium below full employment? Well, if you think about below full employment, what it just asks you to do is draw a model with a recessionary gap. So what I would do to start with is just draw your full employment level of output, LRAS YF. Now, if it said short-run equilibrium below full employment, and we know our short-run equilibrium is where our SRAS and our AD curve intersect. So if we're going below full employment, which is here, our intersection must be somewhere over here. We could call that our AD curve. And what we've just done is show a short-run equilibrium where our actual output level is below full employment, and our price level is below where it would be if we were at long-run equilibrium, which would be up here. What you've just done is you've drawn a model that's of an economy that's already experiencing a recession. So if you were ever asked to draw a recessionary model or a new classical ASAD with a short-run equilibrium below full employment, this is what you would do. Now, what if it asked you the opposite? What if it asked you to draw one above full employment? So draw a new classical ASAD with a short-run equilibrium above full employment. Well, you're doing the opposite now. But this is just asking you to draw it with an inflationary gap. So you're starting with your full employment output level here. You got to be above full employment. So your short-run equilibrium, will be somewhere up here. We'll go with our AD curve there. And once again, we have an output level greater than full employment, low unemployment, high productivity. And here would our price level be? That would be an inflationary ASAD model, or an ASAD model with a short-run equilibrium above full employment. And those are really the three states of ASAD you'll be asked to draw it in: at full employment, below, and above. Now,